Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Putting aside all the philosophical stuff here, I have a question for you, Mrs. Burgess. In terms of how this would work, we talk about, I see here in this language in the summary how you're talking about stopping the federal mandates that requires us to pass legislation or lose federal funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So would you want us then to, are we saying the federal government should give us funding without any strings attached and we get to take the funds we get from the federal government? I guess I'm confused as to what we're saying there because, I mean, that's like the city's coming to us again saying, you have to give us state shared revenues in this amount no matter what we do, or you have to give us money for this road project and you can't tell us what strings are attached. So I'm a little confused as to what we're trying to address with that.
Mr. Crump, Chairman Crump, Mr. Campbell, you know, here's part of the problem that we have. The federal government has begun to treat the states as a branch of the federal government. What they've done is they've came down and they said, there's such things as Real ID. We want you to pass Real ID, which is going to cost the state millions of dollars, and we're not going to pay for it. And here is what we want you to do. That becomes a real problem to the state, especially in these day and times when the state has no money to do these things that they would like for us to do. So as a state, we had the option of opting in or opting out of the program, and I ran the bill last year to opt out of it. Then we have such things as No Child Left Behind, where the federal government kind of brings you in. They pay for the bill for No Child Left Behind up front, and they pay for it so long, and then they pull the funding. And you're left, if you want to continue with the funding, to come with it out of the state budget. And unfortunately, in these days and times, some of those things, the schools like No Child Left Behind. They like the money that it brings in, but they don't want to give up the program. So No Child Left Behind puts so many mandates back onto the schools that they have to come up with so many reports and they have to follow guidelines and things. It's kind of hard for them, you know, if we were to opt out of that program. So, you know, actually the federal government takes our money before they give it back to us. And it's kind of like with the road fund that we send to them in the form of tax dollars. They spend many of our road funds on 108 separate projects. Some of them have absolutely nothing to do with transportation, it's like covered bridges back east. We're what's called a donor state. We give 100% and get 94 back. You know, that's kind of a problem whenever we have so many projects in our state that we need to do. So when it comes to money, they're giving us back our own money to do the projects that they need to do, and some of them are mandated and some of them are not. But, you know, if they don't start the project, then you're not left having to pay the tab for things that maybe you could have done without to start with.
Mr. Chair and Ms. Burgess, and I mean, the Real ID Act issue I'm very familiar with. I supported that, and I think I was a co-sponsor on that bill with you. And I think that is my point, is that if we don't want to take money from the federal government for a certain project, certain initiative, certain whatever it may be, we can always say no. We can always turn that money down. We can always opt out. I mean, look at the federal stimulus package. I don't know many of us that would have said we don't want that money. But we have those options available to us. But again, I don't think we can say to the federal government, we want your money or our money, whatever you want to say. We want that money dispersed to us without any rules. Because again, using an analogy that I think is very appropriate for this, it would be like the city's coming to us and saying, give us the money and don't tell us how we can spend it. And that again, that doesn't work that way. And we have those options opt out when need be. So again, I think this is a bill that, much like a bill we talked about earlier, it's overstepping, I think, what the intent should be, and we're going a bit too far. And Ms. Burgess, you know, you and I agree on a lot of things when it comes to reducing some of the oversight at the federal government level. But with this one, I'm going to have to just, I think we've gone a little too far this time.
To that point, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gillen?
Again, you're talking about two different powers. You're talking about federal and state compared to city and county under state again. So you're mixing apples and oranges is what I see. So under that, guys, for me, the argument's not cohesive.
And Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gown, I think the cities and counties would disagree that I'm mixing apples and oranges. When you tell them what to do, I would say that you're not mixing apples and oranges any longer.
Then you
so
disagree
with that.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah.
Gillen?
Thank you. I'm sorry, we're going to get argued. then under that thought, then you should, just my understanding of how you're defending the cities and counties in this manner with the state, then you should be defending the state with the federal government, is the way I'm seeing the way you're speaking. So I would think that you would be okay with this 10th Amendment resolution.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Gowan, again, as I was saying, I think we've gone too far. We as a state, a city as a city, whatever, we have options if we don't want to. We don't want to accept federal mandates in terms of money. We don't want to accept, we can always opt out. We've done it before. We can do it again. And I think we're just going to be.
Then under that, guys, then I would assume that you would support us doing that with the cities and counties.
In terms of, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Mandating that we can, unless you do our bidding, then we won't give you your.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Gowan, my point is we mandate the cities and counties all of the time in what they can and can't do. And we overstep our bounds, as I said at the beginning of this debate, time and time again. The point with this is we have the option, and I was just bringing up the fiscal issue. In terms of the fiscal issue, we can always say we don't want this money, and we don't have to abide by those federal guidelines. If we don't want federal highway dollars, we don't have to take federal highway dollars. Let's not take them. We won't get any highways, but let's not take them.
I'm confused because it seems that that's good for the cities and counties, but it's not good for the state.
No, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gowan, it is good for the cities and counties, and it is good for the state that we have those options to opt out, and we have those options available to us now. This does nothing to further that cause. Is my
Chairman,
point.
I can count on Mr. Campbell's vote as aye.
As George Stephanopoulos say, we're almost out of time. You'll have to continue this in the green room.
We are.
Nice try.
Come again. Okay, other questions for Ms. Burgess? We'll all have plenty of time for explaining our votes.
Just one last statement, Mr. Chairman. You know, today's federal mandates and funding and unfunded requirements compel states to serve the federal government, and that is a total reversal of the structural that was originally intended. So with that, I thank you for hearing the bill.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chairman, register the opinions online.
Against the bill, we have not wishing to speak Seth Affle for himself. Against the bill, not wishing to speak Ramon Garcia for himself.
Any further discussion before I call the roll? Okay. Then let's call the roll.
Mr. Anginori?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
No.
Mr. Shaven?
No.
Mr. Driggs?
Aye.
Mr. Gowan?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mrs. Tovar? Mr. Montenegro?
Aye.
Mr. Crump?
I would like to explain my vote since I didn't get in on that. Maybe I can get a little background music here. Yeah. But I don't know if you can hear that very well. Yeah. It's important, though. It's part of it. Anyway, I think this is very timely that this is brought forward. I know it's been brought before, but if you haven't noticed, we've had tea parties across the country. We're having a momentous vote today, showing a shift in voters' attitudes. And I think there's a lot of unrest in this country right now. And I think the great silver lining from this, no matter what side you're really on, is an awakening of the people, that they are starting to look at the Constitution, educate themselves, things that they might have taken for granted before, they're no longer taking for granted. You know, why is the federal government doing this? Why isn't this a state issue, or below, for that matter? And I think that is all very positive. But the things that are, from my opinion, that I've seen coming out of Washington lately, I think the people are showing in election after election going forward, recently and going forward, that they're quite concerned about the role of our federal government. And I think there is a role for this bill, this type of bill. Some people say, well, postcards are irrelevant and so forth, but I think this is the beginning of flexing our muscle, and the states starting to band together to push back and to retake their rights under the Constitution. So, with that, I vote aye. I hope that sounded good online.
I couldn't for my musket. I thought you were shuffling cards back there.
Mr. Committee and Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Members, by your vote of 6 aye and 3 nay, you've given a due pass recommendation to this most excellent HCR 2001.